Hi, I'm Gayla Scrivener, ex-corporate girl and now work-from-anywhere adventure seeker. Creating a work-from-anywhere lifestyle isn't without its challenges, but those challenges certainly don't overshadow all the many benefits. What breaks my heart is seeing folks stuck and unhappy in a career and lifestyle when they want more out of life. I believe that we all have the opportunity to create the life of our dreams and earn a living in fun and creative ways to make our dream lifestyle a reality. You too can experience wonderful adventure and freedom as you live life on your own terms. In this weekly podcast, I share experiences when it comes to growing a lifestyle business through guest interviews, content marketing experience and perspectives, virtual leadership lessons, and I'll even throw in some travel adventures. My hope is through all the interviews, the tips, advice, and personal experience, you'll be inspired and motivated to keep going and creating your dream lifestyle. Life's an adventure. There's no time but the present to live life to the fullest. Hi there, and welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here with me today. I've got a question for you. Have you ever felt like you're running like 90 miles a minute and you're not making any progress? It's like you're running faster and faster, and then you realize that you're on like this giant hamster wheel. You can't be on that hamster wheel of always trying to cram in more and more and more work into your day, because hamster wheels don't go nowhere. That's not very good English. They don't go anywhere. Well, you're just spinning in circles. The faster you run, you still are not getting anywhere. And all you get is just tired. But once you slow down and then hop off that hamster wheel, that's when you'll be taking places. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I shared how sometimes you must downsize before you can grow. It was episode 162. So if you haven't listened to it yet, scroll back a couple of episodes and you'll find it. And in that episode, I share several instances where downsizing is helpful for growth, because downsizing in certain areas simplifies things. It simplifies things for you so you can make room for growth. Like downsizing how many meetings fill your schedule, or downsizing the number of services you offer, and not trying to be all things to all people. But since that episode, I've had several conversations where it occurred to me that not only downsizing helps you grow, when it's time to scale up, I discovered, how important it is to just slow down. And that seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? To slow way, way down so you can scale up. But it isn't counterintuitive at all. When you're growing your business, there will come a time where you'll be stretched. You'll feel so stretched so thin that you don't know how you can possibly do everything. Well, the key is that you won't do everything. Not by yourself anyway. But during this growth period, it's going to be super important to tug on the reins a bit and refrain from just pushing to do more. Just tug on those reins. Slow down. Slowing down when there's so much to do is extremely hard. It's so much easier said than done. I know it is, because I feel that tension myself, especially when your to-do list is a mile long and you feel like you've just got to get it all done. You stay on that hamster wheel. So getting off of that hamster wheel is super hard. But when you do slow down, you're able to put things into place to scale to the next level of your business. And here are 3 ways I believe you must slow down to scale up. At least this is what I do, and every time I'm intentional on these 3 things, I've seen growth and I'm able to get to that next level. So let's dive right into what these 3 things are: reading, documenting, and planning. Let's talk first about reading. Now, I used to think I was way too busy for reading. And to be quite honest, I do get into cycles where I will revert back into that way of thinking, but not so much now as it used to be. You know, it's easy to say, I'm too busy to read. And sometimes I feel like I can't find even 30 minutes to crack open a book. I'd roll out of bed and just power onto my computer and immediately get started on the stuff, my to-do list, and all the millions of tasks that I need to do for the day. And when I get into that way of thinking, then it's my belief that you close yourself off for truly scaling. And over the past few years, I've made it a point to carve out reading time. And like I said, sometimes I go into waves to where I revert back and I skip a day or two in reading, and I really feel the repercussions of that. I believe that reading expands your mindset and opens yourself up for true growth. And I know that there are many forms of absorbing a book besides the tangible page turner. And I know a lot of folks, quote unquote, read books through Audible, and that is good. And I've listened to my share, and I listen to my share of Audible books. But I have a tough time counting that as reading. Sure, the information from the pages is poured into our brains through earbuds, and there is benefit of that. But the actual act of reading uses different brain muscles. At least that's what I believe. I'm no scientist by any means, but that's just what I think. And when you listen to an Audible book, you're more likely to do something else at the same time. So you're still doing busy work, maybe mowing, exercising, driving, or doing housework. You're doing something else. So it's easy and quite beneficial to be listening while doing something else. You're knocking out two things at once, and you have a certain amount of personal growth potential. But like I said, I'm no scientist, but I believe that your brain is split on thinking about two things at once. But opening a book and reading the words, I believe, makes you slow down and think a little bit differently. It forces you to slow down. I like tangible books, but with all of my travel, I tend to have a lot of books on Kindle, but I found that I have the same book in more than one form so that I can absorb it. I have many books on all three, Audible, Kindle, and a tangible book, so that I can get the information anywhere that I'm at and retain it in different forms. But like I said, opening a book and reading those words, I think, uses different brain muscles, and you have to slow down for that. And that can drive you nuts if you're not an avid reader and you feel like you're just too busy to read. That act of slowing down. I know when I first started reading again and making an intentional time, it's like I have this gut feeling. It's like, I shouldn't be doing this. I've got too many things to do. Well, just try to calm those nerves down and slow down. You know, for most of my 20s and 30s, I didn't read much. And I was one of those 27% of Americans who don't read on a regular basis or don't even crack open a book in a year. A little secret about myself, I've always considered myself a slow reader, and that drove me nuts, and I felt inadequate, and I thought, since I'm not a fast reader, I'm wasting too much time on that. And in fact, in elementary school, I hated to be called on to read out loud. I just hated it because I was teased for reading slower, mispronouncing words, just teased. And those standardized tests, it seemed as I was kind of singled out as not being able to comprehend what I was reading. My comprehension skills were not the best. And I let those things hover into my mind and limit me. So I was always have been super self-conscious that I just didn't read much. I just didn't. And the first couple of years in business, I thought I was way too busy to read. But then I became very intentional about reading. I buckled down and worked on overcoming my self-limiting thoughts about my reading skills. And I became intentional. I carved out time to read, and a whole lot of great things happened. By allowing myself to have that intentional reading time, and I slowed way down, and I thought, hey, it's okay if I read slow. You know what happened? I started to get better at it, and I started to read faster and got more done in my intentional reading time and retained more. But it allowed me to open my mind to other ideas and help me to think differently in so many ways, whether it was in creative ways or honing in my critical thinking or even just learning something fun. It made my whole workday go a lot better. Every day that I set aside and carve out some quiet time at the very beginning of the day, because I find for me that is so much helpful. I slow down, and that becomes part of my morning routine, is to read a little bit, like 30 minutes. In my habit tracker, I have read 30 minutes. It helps me think better. That's what my habit tracker reminds me of. If I skip a day, my whole day is not as organized, or I don't think as clearly, and I'm not as energized. And in fact, you'll notice in my guest interview episodes that most of the time I ask my guests what their favorite resource or book is. It's kind of a self-serving question because I love to know what one thing triggers to lead to my guest's success. You know, I know there's a lot of things that compiles up, but sometimes you can pull out maybe one thing that made a difference to get you to the next level. And I love asking my guests that. And most of the time, the resource is a book that has helped them professionally and created a thought and a movement in the right direction for them. If I haven't read that book yet, I usually buy it and read it. Now, I started listing all of these books that my guests should suggest on my website, and I guess I wanted to create my own little memory library, and since it's on my website, you can get to it at gaylascrivener.com and just click on the resources tab, and that's where you'll find them. And my intention is to write a little synopsis on all those. Right now, that's most of them are just blank, and you'll be linked to the guest episode, a podcast, and also a link to the books. So if you're wondering what some of the books in my library are, go over there, gaylascrivener.com, and click on the resources tab. But intentionally setting aside time to read has made me a better reader over the years, so that I don't have to have that silly mindset that's holding me back. It's the practice of doing it. And I had this mindset when I was younger that I was not any good at it at all. So slowing down and intentionally read, using those muscles to get better at it, has opened up my mind, and it has helped me get to different levels of my business. And it also has helped me in the next two areas that I'm going to discuss, the documenting and the planning. So let's talk documentation. Let's face it, solopreneurs are notorious for keeping everything in our heads of all the systems that we create for ourselves. We figure out how to do something, and we've got our style on how we do it and how things should be done. And who has time to jot things down? Besides, since you're running a business of one, why document? Well, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't at least document some key processes in your business. Writing down what should happen, thinking about the whole process. Let's say about your sales process, what should be done in order to acquire a new client, what your billing process is, what your client onboarding process is. Documenting these processes will help you be organized in not only remembering all the steps, but also holding yourself accountable for following the process. And you can flesh out ways of becoming more efficient. Well, that's the ideal scenario, isn't it? But for all practical purposes, most of us who leave the corporate world and start doing our own thing, we don't document. We just do. I know that was certainly the case for me. I was just winging it. Freelancing at first, finding any client I could get and figuring things out as I go along and then moving to the next thing. Just keeping things in my head. But then when it came time to hire, the need for documentation became much, much, much more important. I needed to show someone else how and why I did certain tasks so that I could get certain things off of my plate. And that's when slowing down to document was necessary. And it was hard because I was busy, right? With all of this stuff that I needed to do. But I needed to slow down to show someone else how to do what it is that I needed to delegate to them. So instead of documenting like the whole process, like it is the ideal, what usually happens is that you'll start documenting just pieces of a process or the how-to stuff, which is fantastic. You've got to start somewhere. What happens, and especially in a face-to-face scenario when you're training somebody, you just tell them how you do it and then you move on. And everything seems to be like word of mouth of the training. So you're transferring the knowledge of what's in your head into what's in the head of someone else. And there's not any form or process, I guess you could say, for documenting, and nothing is formally written down. Honestly, I admit I go into waves of documenting and just doing things myself just to get it done. So this is an ongoing type of struggle that you may find yourself in. Documenting things doesn't come natural to everyone, and that is okay. I think that it's human nature that we go into waves. So I'm just telling you, when I intentionally document processes, it gives me time to think about all the steps and if there is an easier way. It challenges me to make sure I'm explaining things in a manner that others can understand. And the easiest way to start documenting processes is with those how-to tasks when you start delegating. And the easiest way is through video. And you may not want to do video, but really, if you're telling somebody how to do something, video is the way to do it. It's not like you have to record your face and how you're explaining things. But when you record what you're doing once and showing how to do it, when you record it once, then your team or your assistant can watch it. And when there's staff turnover, you already have the documentation. Somebody else can watch it. You aren't having to show them how to do it again. It's on video. But I think that video is good. It is super great. But I also think that the written SOPs and the steps and like a checklist is even better. But the beauty of that is that if you video what you're doing, then you don't have to write up the SOP or the standard operating procedure or the checklist, whatever you want to call it. You can have the person that you've delegated that task to write up the steps for you, and then you review it. And it is amazing what you discover in that process. This will help them better understand the steps. And it helps you to make sure you're communicating what your expectations are and what you intend to happen. This process of you videoing and somebody else writing out the checklist, it shakes out questions and misunderstanding of what the process is. And most of what I train in involves what buttons to push of any programs or software I'm usually, working on the computer. My stuff and a lot of stuff that you may delegate, especially if you delegate to a virtual staff member, there's a lot of screen captures that you can do, and you don't even have to worry about having video your face on the video. You're just simply showing a how-to on the screen. And there's a lot of screen capture video recording programs out there, but the one I use all the time is called Screencast-O-Matic. Gosh, about 9 years ago or so, somebody had recommended it to me, and it was so affordable. It continues to be affordable, and I really like it. It's easy to use. I really like it. And there are other ones out there that's maybe more popular, but Screencast-O-Matic is definitely my go-to. And when it comes to documentation, I found the book Systemology has been super helpful. Now, I've been documenting for quite some time, different processes, but when I read that book, it really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. First of all, it was like, hey, I'm on the right track, but here I can improve on my documenting skills and my how to organize it. And it really struck a chord, especially how to organize my operating procedures one way and then my project management in another. But that could be a whole other podcast. After reading Systemology, it hit me that tapping into the systems that we've created in Scrivener Solutions is exactly an advantage our clients really like. I don't know why it took me so long to really figure that, they like our systems. They don't have to figure out every single system in their company. They've delegated to a team who already has systems in place so that they can focus on other things in, other areas of their business. So Scrivener Solutions we are a content marketing agency, but it's our systems that we implement for our clients. That's really where we shine. So systems have become even more important to me, and I've really grown to love documenting processes and developing process improvement procedures. It's just really cool. I love that. So slowing down to document, it's not only worth it if you want to scale, it's definitely a part of the whole business growth process, that's for sure. So let's talk about the final thing that you need to slow down in order to scale up, and that's planning. Too often, we find ourselves way too busy to take a breath and plan, even carving out a little bit of time to slow down, take a breath, and thinking ahead of even planning out what you'll do tomorrow is hard for many folks. It's easy to say, I don't even know what tomorrow's going to bring, but here's the thing, no one knows what tomorrow's going to bring, but at least you can set in motion a plan to accomplish certain things. It gives you some direction. It gets you off the hamster wheel. So slow down to think about the future by making plans will get you closer to whatever destination you're trying to head for. Without planning, that busyness of everyday tasks and the unexpected that always happens, that will get you off course. Being a true business owner means that you pull yourself out of the weeds. You've got to pull yourself out of the weeds and analyze and look at things overhead. Look at things as a whole. You've got to see things, how they interact and affect with one another in your business. You lift yourself out of thinking of all those little tiny details, and you've got to see the overall picture. Planning and setting goals are one thing, but then you must implement. Implementation is a big deal. You must break things down into smaller chunks to implement. I'm like most folks and will do annual goals. I've done annual goals forever, it seems. But then I feel terrible when I lose momentum in achieving those goals, and I find myself veering off path. And every few months or so, it's like, oh, man, it's like I'm starting over. Well, then I read Gino Wickman's book, Traction, and he explains EOS, or what he calls the entrepreneurial operating system. And in the book, the author explains the importance of setting aside a quarterly goal setting and planning day. A whole day. Slow down for a whole day. What he explains is that the management team, even if it starts out with just you, but the whole management team should carve out that day, to that one day a quarter, to set aside goals for that quarter, or what he calls rocks. He explains the 10-year, the 3-year, but the importance of that quarterly goals. And then every single week, carving out that time to slow down, to meet with the management team, to break down those goals and into tasks that you're going to accomplish during that week. So I got from that book, it's like how important it is to slow down and carve out that time. He explains that every 90 days is imperative because in about 90 days, that's when he found that it's human nature to veer off course. And so reading that made me feel so much better that I'm not alone when I find myself veering off course. And when he said it in those terms, it's about 90 days that it's just like, oh, I'm losing momentum, or I'm going in a totally different direction than I really wanted to be. I was back on that hamster wheel and veered off to things of how I used to do things. And I got off course. So slowing down to plan means you take that time to list out what you've accomplished so far. See where you've been, where you want to be, so you're looking at the future, and then how you want to get there, getting those important things lined out, and then you implement. It's like rinse and repeat. You just got to do that. And it's so hard to slow down, but make an intentional effort to slow down in the right ways, because without slowing down, you can't recharge and scale, at least not scale in a sustainable manner. It's normal to say that you don't have time to slow down. You just don't have time. It's normal. But the need to slow down happens at the busiest time. So you're thinking, I just don't have time. But that's where the counterintuitive thing happens. That's when it's the most important time to slow down. That resistance of feeling like you need to keep going that 90 miles a minute when you should be taking a deep breath and putting into motion the long-term benefits of reading, documenting, and planning. All right, I'll wrap things up for today, but I do hope that today's episode has been helpful, and I'll have links to those books that I mentioned in the show notes and a link to Screencast-O-Matic if you want to check that out. And if you aren't already a subscriber, I'd be honored if you would subscribe. And if you're feeling extra generous, why not leave a positive comment? Your comments will help others find this content, and it'll be super, super great. So thanks for listening, and have a fantastic week.